Joining us on the guest line, Caroline Glick. She's the deputy managing editor of the Jerusalem Post. She joins us from Jerusalem. Caroline, welcome back to the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. What has reaction been to the president's remarks on Saturday?
Well, thanks so much for having me on the show, Austin. Happy Labor Day. Here in Israel, I think there's a unanimous assessment that Obama just humiliated himself in the United States and endangered U.S. interests and also Israel with what he did. He showed, in the words of many of the members of the Israeli government, abject cowardice in trying to pass the buck to the U.S. Congress, which, as you noted, he spent the better part of his presidency saying he doesn't have to listen to. It's almost like in the absence of an international coalition that he can lead from behind. He's trying to lead from behind Congress, and this has very disastrous repercussions for how American power is perceived in the Middle East, particularly in terms of American willpower and the credibility of American pledges to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons.
Caroline Glick, deputy managing editor of the Jerusalem Post, on the guest line here on Mornings in the Mall at WMAL. Caroline, you mentioned that the latest maneuver from our president endangers Israelis. I'm wondering, would Israel be any better off, would the world be any better off, had President Obama, gone solo, so to speak, and dropped some sort of munitions over the country of Syria without congressional approval?
So here, let me just explain for a second how this endangers Israel. Israel doesn't need the United States to defend it from Syria. Israel has been perfectly capable of preventing Syria from proliferating weapons of mass destruction to Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations, and has done so in a series of airstrikes over the past 2 years of the Syrian civil war. Unfortunately, all of those operations, which were all successful, were also all leaked to the media by administration sources, leading many Israeli commentators and military officials to fear that the United States is, for some bizarre reason, trying to provoke a war between Syria and Israel by denying Israel plausible deniability about those attacks. But the reason why what America is doing is endangering Israel is not because it's provoking war per se. It's because Israel didn't need the United States to intervene in the first place. Neither did Syria. Neither did Turkey, neither did Jordan, beyond what the United States is already doing. The problem is that when the United States said that it was going to strike, and then made clear that the strike wasn't going to be a serious strike, but rather a shot across the bow, after which there would be no shot at the bow, it first degraded America's credibility and the credibility of American power. But when, even after doing that, the president then said, "Well, wait a minute, I'm blinking. I'm not going to move forward. And in this game of chicken, the Syrians have beat me." What the Americans have done is invited the Syrians and their Iranian bosses to feel empowered and to feel that America not only doesn't have Israel's back, it doesn't have its own back, and that they can feel much more free to attack Israel and to develop nuclear weapons very, very quickly, because they don't think that there's any credibility to American statements any longer. And so what the United States has done is embolden people who might have been deterred by previous American statements to the effect that the United States was going to prevent chemical weapons from being used again in Syria, and also from preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons.
Caroline Glick, deputy managing editor at the Jerusalem Post, on the guest line here at WMAL. Caroline, take it outside of Israel for a moment, if you would, please. Your thoughts. Obviously, the Jerusalem Post, where you work, is a global publication. What are nations abroad, perhaps even on the continent of Europe, how are they viewing the United States at this juncture, in your estimation?
Now, unfortunately, and I really do feel I have to say this in direct terms, the United States, under Obama's leadership, is turning into a global laughingstock. I mean, he has gutted the U.S. military in a lot of ways, particularly with the sequestration, which no other nation, I don't think, has ever sort of willy-nilly shrunk its military in this way. with no rhyme or reason. And then leaving Afghanistan essentially to the Taliban, negotiating with the Taliban, ignoring Egypt or supporting the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which is an enemy of the United States and of American allies in the region. The United States has lost its credibility with its Arab allies, particularly with the Saudis, and it has harmed its relationship with Israel. No American government has been less trusted than the Obama government, than the Obama administration in the 50 years of the U.S.-Israel strategic alliance. This is something that's simply unprecedented here, and people around the region and around the world are now feeling that the United States is not a credible ally and not a formidable foe. And that is very dangerous. It's dangerous for the region, it's dangerous for the world, and I dare say it's very dangerous for U.S. national security itself.
Caroline Glick, a final few seconds here. We, the people here in the United States, we have twice elected this president. He remains, for the most part, fairly popular. What would you want Americans to know about this global perception beyond what you said? What would you warn us or admonish us with?
The United States saw on September 11th that the two oceans separating it from other countries does not protect it from attack. It's been repeatedly targeted since then by jihadists both on its shores and throughout the world. And one of the things that kept these enemies of the United States at bay was a perception throughout the world that the United States meant what it said, and that its word was credible when, and that position is now devastated because of Obama's very strange, amateurish, and irresponsible behavior on Syria. And that means that a lot of the self-restraint that American enemies have engaged in because they fear American power is going to be loosened, or is likely to be loosened, and it's very frightening. And that is why so many people say that the United States cannot ignore the world much as it would like to, because the world is never going to ignore the United States. And what American presidents do and what they say, but even more importantly, what they do matters. It matters not just for the American people, it matters for the perception of the United States of America throughout the world, and as a consequence, it also has very, very grave implications for American national security.
Caroline Glick, Deputy Managing Editor at the Jerusalem Post. Caroline, thanks so much for joining us. Always good to talk.